For the past few years, a lot of friends have been bombarding me with questions on what kitchen stuff to get, and since we're in the midst of the holiday season, I thought it would be a good time because, you know, the sales and stuff. We've cooked food from over 30 countries in the last few months, and these are some of the tools that I use to make it happen. We'll talk about what I look for in a good piece of equipment and where I like to buy them. And if you stick around to the end, I'll be listing what I think are some great gifts for your chefy friends at a few different price points. This is going to be a much more casual style of episode in comparison to my other stuff. I usually try to stay neutral and professional, but when it comes to kitchen tools, I have some really strong opinions and not all of them are logical, so bear with me. We'll call this segment Mr. Chicken's Opinions. In general, what I look for in a kitchen tool is sturdy construction, comfortable use, and minimal plastic, and I like it to be solid state, meaning minimal moving parts. And if it has moving parts, that they're made of sturdy materials. Now that we have that down, let's get started. I use two knives for basically everything. This is a chef's knife and it sort of looks like the textbook definition of a knife. It's great for big stuff like slicing through a huge piece of meat, chopping onions, and basically whatever you throw at it. This little guy is called a paring knife and most professionals recommend this as your secondary blade. It's great for peeling things, doing fine cuts. I have a vegetable peeler so I don't really use the paring knife that often. Instead I go for this. This is a prep knife and it's great for, well, prepping things. I love this knife a lot and I probably use it more than any other blade in the kitchen. It's sort of like the big brother to the paring knife. The longer length means it's great for slicing steaks and larger stuff while still being able to do very fine, accurate knife work for prissy stuff. We'll do a full-on knife episode one of these days, but for now, this is what you need to know when you go to the store. I judge a blade by what I like to call the 3 C's: comfort, quality, and cost. Wait, one of those is off. Comfort. Is it comfortable to hold? And you want to test this by doing the pinch grip, where you pinch at the very back of the blade by the bolster and gently wrap your fingers around the handle. A well-designed knife should feel balanced when you're pinching it, and this is going to help reduce fatigue on your wrist when you're doing a whole lot of chopping. Next up is composition. Steel comes in a lot of different flavors. Full-on high-carbon steel is a classic, but it corrodes and can be quite brittle, so I'd avoid it. I go for a mid-carbon martensitic stainless steel. This one is made with Friodur, which is just a fancy name for a 440C stainless steel that's been cryo-treated. That's a lot of technical mumbo-jumbo, but all you need to know is that this kind of steel is great at getting sharp and keeping an edge like a carbon steel blade, but it doesn't turn into a pile of rust like that carbon steel blade. This knife is made with a full tang, which means that the metal goes all the way back to the punt for a better weight balance. All of these little things like steel quality and construction are going to mean a higher base cost. And you can buy these very, very cheap knives like these commercial kitchen ones, or you can buy a very, very expensive one like this Japanese Damascus 7,000 layer forged under the light of the 7th moon of autumn whatever blade. Most of my stuff is in the in-between zone. In general, I try to go for the absolute minimum cost for a knife that satisfies the comfort and quality aspects, and that usually brings me to the Germans. And yes, Redditors, the Swiss-made Victorinox Fibrox is a pretty great blade, all things considered. It's affordable at 40-ish bucks, and the steel is respectable. Unfortunately, I found the handle to be quite uncomfortable for me, and let's be honest, it's not exactly a looker. Fortunately, I was able to find these filling blades at a very comparable price. I know it's cliche, but Costco is awesome for this. I bought these two blades together for 100 bucks from one of those Costco traveling booths, which is a far cry from the retail prices online. I've seen similar discounts at their outlet stores, but those aren't too common. For my dishonorable mentions, dishonor on the ceramic so-called blade, and oh man, I'm glad the trend died out on these things. Pros, they're very lightweight, which means less fatigue, and they're super sharp and basically don't get dull. Cons, and this is a big one, depending on the brand, they'll shatter and chip if you look at them the wrong way. That's super dangerous, so no thanks. Okay, let's move on to the cooking stuff. First off, check the handles for solid rivets, no screws which can and will come loose. For longevity, try to avoid the stuff with plastic parts since they can get heat damaged and become unrepairable. I find that I can cook almost everything I need with these two, a big stock pot and a medium saucepan. Both of these are made with real thick stainless steel, and that's a pretty important thing. Super thin sidewalls means that the food inside can scorch and burn really easily, and not to mention the pot's gonna get damaged and dented. So if you can bend the sides of your pot with your fingertips, probably look elsewhere. Another thing to look for is multi-ply construction, which means that the bottom of the pot is a sandwich of materials that are more thermally conductive than stainless steel, like copper or aluminum. These guys are a triple layered construction from back when Wolfgang Puck still made good pans. And they're actually really well constructed. There's no thermal plate on the bottom, which collects a lot of gunk and isn't really conducive for even heating along the sides of the pot. Next up are enameled cast iron pots or Dutch ovens, and they're some of my favorite tools. You'll see me use these guys in a lot of episodes, and they're great for heat retention, which means they're perfect for deep frying and long braises. Also, they're super durable, which means that we can stick them in the oven, campfire, put it on the stove, hit it with a truck, whatever. And they also look real pretty. I'd recommend going for a medium large-ish size around the 6-quart range, which is more than enough for baking bread and doing a family size stew. You don't need to go super expensive here. Functionally, there's a very small difference between expensive and cheap Dutch ovens. Cast iron is cast iron, so the thermal properties should be almost the same between brands. The biggest delta is going to come down to the quality of the enamel. Here's a 10-year-old Le Creuset versus a 10-year-old Le Kirkland from Costco. There's almost no wear on the Le Creuset, but does that justify the massive premium? I don't think so. I think the tax on the Le Creuset was actually higher than the entire Kirkland one, so save your money and go to Costco. Dishonor goes to non-stick pots and aluminum pots. Non-stick pots will almost certainly lose their Teflon coating, and I must say I've never had an issue with soup sticking to a pot, but that's just me. Aluminum is actually a fantastic conductor of heat, and they're great for getting hot real quick, so boiling pasta, veggies, great. But if you cook something acidic like a tomato sauce for a long time in aluminum, the acid is going to leach out some of those aluminum ions into your food, and that does not taste great. That's why manufacturers of acidic canned products always put an inert polymer lining inside of their aluminum cans. There are anodized aluminum pots which have a nice non-reactive barrier on the surface, but it's oh so easy to scratch off, which means you're back at square one. The acid leaching still happens in cast iron and to a lesser extent stainless steel cookware too, but the sharp metallic flavor is much more noticeable and much more unpleasant in aluminum. And just to mention it, because I know someone's going to comment it down below, there have been some stirrings on the internet about the adverse health effects of consuming aluminum, and I'll leave it at that. Next up are the pans. Real similar to the pots, go for a solid metal construction with real rivets or unibody handled designs. I do almost all my cooking in these three. First off, the medium-sized cast iron pan, which is great for high heat roasting, baking, and of course steaks. Like the Dutch oven, this is due to the super high thermal mass of a cast iron product. I really love them, but they do require a little bit of maintenance. After you use them, let them cool off a bit and then douse it in cold water, and without soap, take a steel wool and scrub off some of the grubby bits. When it's more or less chunk free, stick it back on the stove, dry it off for a bit, and then rub some oil on it to protect the surface from the elements. It might seem a little bit complicated, but once you do it a few times, it becomes second nature. It's a similar story with a carbon steel pan, which I like to think of as a thinner, fancier version of cast iron. I use this guy for a lot more fast action sauteing, flipping, and stuff, and the lower thermal mass means that it's a lot more reactive to the temperature of the stove, meaning it heats up and cools off a lot faster, which is great for very temperature sensitive things like stir-fried dishes and seafood. The reason I prefer these guys to something like stainless steel comes down to seasoning, and no, I'm not talking salt and pepper. Over time, with proper maintenance, cast iron and carbon steel will develop an almost non-stick layer of seasoning. Seasoning is just a term used to describe the dark, shiny patina that develops on bare metal when oil is heated past its polymerization point. It's highly hydrophobic, which means it won't adhere to the water in your food, and oleophilic, meaning that oil likes to stick to it. That means that as long as there's a little bit of oil in the pan, there will be a thin protective layer preventing the watery solids from sticking to the base metal. You'll probably notice that neither of them have a Teflon coating on them, which is another method scientists developed to make pans non-stick. Teflon is the brand name of the chemical PTFE7B, or polytetrafluoroethylene, which was created by DuPont in 1938. The structure is comprised of strings of carbon atoms surrounded entirely by fluorine. This carbon-fluorine bond is one of the strongest bonds found in organic chemistry, and this strength makes it extremely non-reactive to chemicals and heat. It's completely hydrophobic and oleophobic, which results in one of the lowest friction coefficients of any solid on the market, and that makes it a pretty good option for coating pans. It allows you to make typically very sticky foods without the need for excess oils. The downside is its hardness, or rather softness. Teflon has a Rockwell hardness score of 58, which places it below steel, aluminum, and even some hardwoods. While the health effects of ingested Teflon flakes are debatable, what is true is that Teflon will degrade in temperatures exceeding 500 degrees Fahrenheit, and the relative softness of the material means that using a metal tool in a nonstick pan will leave your pan scratched and sticky. That's why I use my carbon steel or cast iron. I can rebuild the nonstick seasoning on the cast iron pan in minutes by burning on some more oil, but once a nonstick pan is scratched, that Teflon is not coming back. But that doesn't necessarily exclude nonstick from my kitchen. With all the hate in the world for Teflon at the moment, I want to play devil's advocate for a second. It gives you the unique ability to cook soft, sticky foods like eggs at low temperature for a perfect finish without browning, which is the major weakness of stainless steel, which is only non-stick when it's the temperature of the surface of the sun. And that's why I always like to have a non-stick hiding somewhere in the kitchen, far away from all the scary sharp things like cotton swabs and mean comments. I buy all these guys on the cheap from, you guessed it, Costco. The flaky Teflon means that even the most expensive of pans ain't gonna last too long, so save your money and go for commercial quality. Even though we all know that microplastics are so delicious, I usually use a wooden cutting board. Go for something of decent quality with natural treatment. I highly recommend picking up a nice large cutting board. Being able to prep multiple things at once and also have enough room to butcher meat and roll out dough makes life a whole lot easier. Mega dishonor on the cutting boards made of marble, glass, metal, or any other crazy hard surface. I don't know why these things exist except to keep knife sharpeners and emergency rooms in business. They will destroy your knives, so please, please, please do not use them. Okay, that was pretty much all the big stuff, so now it's time to go into the random stuff speed round. Vegetable peeler should be comfy, sturdy, and easy to clean. Costco. Can opener, same thing. Comfy, sturdy, and also Costco. Measuring cups are pretty much essential for baking and a lot of other things dependent on volumes, and like most wayward souls, I actually have 2.5 sets because I lost a few pieces in each set along the way. This pepper mill is actually one knick-knack that I was pretty surprised by. It's suspiciously similar to a $200 one that you might have been tempted by in the past. I got it for the full metal construction and really solid burr quality. The performance is actually really fantastic, and like the real version, each crank puts out a buttload of pepper, and the grind quality is really nice and even. I got it on Amazon. It's called the Luvan pepper mill or something, and it's on sale right now along with everything else if you want to get it. That said, it's not the only option, so shop around and be sure to check reviews before getting the other stuff. Some honorable mentions are my bench scraper, box grater for big things, microplane for little things, and my hand crank cheese grater for when I'm not in the mood for ritual epidermal sacrifice to the box grater or microplane. Speaking of, I also use a mandolin slicer sometimes for things like potato chips and pretty veggie toppings, but I will warn you yet again, the mandolin is evil and it wants your blood, so use a handguard. I'd avoid buying gimmicky unitasking things, though I must admit that I did buy this egg slicer, which I actually ended up using pretty often on this channel, so that's a green light for me. Next up are the small appliances. Man, I'm getting kind of tired now. Can I get a little, nope, back to work. This Vitamix blender is my pride and joy. It has the power to blend all. I use it at least once a week and in a lot of my episodes. There's no way in heck that I would ever pay for one myself, but my roommates along with like 10 other friends chipped in to get me one for my birthday. Thanks guys, and yes, this was from Costco. An instant read thermometer is so useful for roast steaks and checking on fevers. Just kidding. This guy is also from Costco and it's really great. Next up is my kitchen scale. It's great for weighing food things scale style. Nice. I make tea on the regular and coffee sometimes, so an electric kettle is an absolute must. It's very, very fast and very, very convenient. And yes, you can use the microwave to heat your water up, but I did have a British friend back in the day that told me that the microwave makes your tea evil. Whatever that means. Honorable mention goes to my water filter. This is a reverse osmosis setup in the sink, which is super fancy, and you don't need to do it, just get a Brita filter. My rice cooker is an absolute trooper. She makes rice real good and keeps it warm too. 10 out of 10. And surprisingly, I actually bought this one from Target. Just kidding, it was also from Costco. All right, we're getting into the final stretch here. These are my spoons and spoon-like items. First up for spoon is wooden spoon. Again, solid construction, which is great for stirring stews and constructive criticism. Just kidding. Although I am a little bit crazy, so when most people use a spatula or tongs, I use spoon. Burgers, spoon. Mixing eggs, spoon. Sauteing, spoon. Tasting stews, surprisingly spatula. I usually do all of this with a Korean style spoon, which has a super long handle that's great at keeping my fingers away from the scary poppies. I use metal mixing bowls like crazy. They are truly multi-purpose, indestructible, and super cheap if you know where to look. These guys came from Costco Business Center, but any restaurant supply store should have them for about $1 to $2 a pop. Honorable mentions go to my handleless rolling pin, mortar and pestle, and various strainers. Not sure how specific I gotta be in this episode, but I guess I should also give shoutouts to forks and knives. They're great for when you want to eat stuff, I guess, so honorable mention, forks and knives. Of course, we can't do a utensil segment without talking about chopsticks. I really like chopsticks, and I think they're better than forks, and way less pretentious than those stupid tweezer things everyone was using a while ago. On a side note, if you see somebody using plating tweezers at home, run far away. You're probably gonna be the main course. Alright, we finally made it to the end, and as promised, I'm gonna be ranking my top gifts to get your culinarily inclined companions. Starting in the way too expensive, and I'm probably gonna have to eat cereal for dinner for the next few weeks category, I'm gonna highly recommend the Vitamix blender, which you can get from Costco and I think Sam's Club for $299. It's insanely well built and super powerful, and it can turn anything into a liquid, and it's amazing. In the fancy and probably just a little bit too expensive category at $70, it's a tie between the Le Kirkland, they're actually called Tramontina, but I like to call it Le Kirkland Dutch oven set from Costco, and the Amazon knockoff of the Man Kitchen Pepper Mill. Both are great products and they're super useful. In the good gift category, it's gotta be a nice teak cutting board. And if you're gonna buy one for yourself, wait until after Christmas when everyone returns theirs. You'll get a much better price. And finally, in the stocking stuffer category, I have an instant read thermometer and a microplane, and a pack of band-aids when the microplane goes wrong. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Mr. Chicken's Opinions, and it's a little bit different from our normal material, so let me know if you want to see more of this kind of stuff in the future. Also, if I missed anything, feel free to let me know in the comment section below, and until next time, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.